curiosity as a superpower.
Is it true that Science of Mind teaches
What can I do?
that you should only think positive thoughts?
We have to do something.
Well, it seems it has often been taught that way.
We can no longer sit and watch
The shoulds lead to duality.
and wait for someone else to do something.
So here's the short answer. No.
So welcome to another episode of Truth Be Told. It's episode 115. I can't even believe that. And so we are tackling a new theme this month, curiosity as a superpower. So we asked ourselves, I wonder what we could do this month to really sink deep into this idea of curiosity and how asking questions can actually create expansive answers in our life. And so we thought, hey, why not for this month, we take each segment and pose a question and then our response to that question. And so that's what we're going to do. So that's what you're going to see today. You're going to see us tackle two questions and then have a discussion about it. And so what we know about curiosity is the more that we can sink deep into the questions, often we can create new and exciting answers in our life. And so we know that curiosity is a superpower. There's power in asking questions. There's power in sinking deeper. There's power in seeing things behind the surface or under the surface. And so that's what we're going to do this month. We're going to explore curiosity as a superpower by asking some really big questions. So thanks for tuning in. And so just sit back and relax and enjoy this episode of Truth Be Told.
Is it true that Science of Mind teaches that you should only think positive thoughts? Well, it seems it has often been taught that way, that somehow negative thoughts are bad and positive thoughts are good. These thoughts in this category are the ones you should have, and these thoughts in this category are the ones that you shouldn't have. Okay, so here's the short answer. No, it is not a belief of this philosophy that you should only have positive thoughts, although it seems it is commonly misunderstood that you should. This emphasis on the power of positive thinking and beliefs can sometimes lead individuals to interpret the teachings of Science of Mind as suggesting that one should only think positive thoughts. You see, the issue here is that our brains don't care if we think we should only have positive thoughts. That is not the way our brains work. It is a naturally occurring part of our lives that we have all kinds of thoughts. Thoughts that we deem desirable, thoughts that we deem undesirable, and really everything in between. And by assigning a should or shouldn't on any particular thought, we're actually creating dissonance in our own thinking. And that is ironically the main thing that Science of Mind is attempting to alleviate us from. This type of cognitive dissonance, when reality looks different than our beliefs, very easily leads us to spiritual bypass. The it's all good when it isn't, or trying to flat out deny the existence of something that is right in our face, just so we don't have to recognize that it's right in our face. Basically, the shoulds lead to duality. You end up with the shoulds and shouldn'ts. So, it is important to note that some of the principles of the Science of Mind suggest that what we focus on expands, and that positive thoughts and beliefs attract positive experiences and circumstances into our lives. This emphasis on the importance of positive thinking can also contribute to the idea that one should only have positive thoughts. While it is true that what we focus on expands, there's way more to it than that, because it is not just what we consciously focus on that influences our experience. We must also consider what programs are running behind the scenes. What are we unconsciously focusing on? So if our shoulds tell us we need to not think a thought that we are in fact thinking, especially if it's a reoccurring thought, then we are actually creating more power in that thought than if we had just had the thought and let it go. We are creating more mental focus and importance on that thought. Ultimately, this brings us back to one of the most deep-seated beliefs for those of us in Western society. Good versus evil, or good versus bad. It seems as if it would be much easier to categorize thoughts as good thoughts and bad thoughts. These thoughts make me feel good, so they must be good, and these thoughts make me feel bad, so they must be bad. Or these are uncomfortable, and so they must be bad. Somewhere along the line, we developed this idea that discomfort is bad. So we should simply just not have any bad thoughts or experiences. Well, maybe this is a whole other video, but that hasn't really worked out so well for us. And honestly, it's impossible. You can't not have bad thoughts. So, when we read philosophies such as the science of mind through the default Western filter, default mindset, we can easily distort the message in a way that agrees with our bias towards wanting to always feel comfortable, to look for right and wrong, and to develop a list of shoulds and shouldn'ts in an attempt to more easily navigate life. If this, then that. If this, then this. Well, only if it were that easy, right? Yeah, life doesn't work that way, and science of mind doesn't actually say any of that. What is actually suggested is that life has desirable and undesirable experiences. The desirables are not good or bad, and the undesirables are not good or bad. These are simply life experiences that point the way, and sometimes the way means a change in direction, and sometimes that way is right through the thing, but it's never avoidance. There is a common misperception that science of mind believes in transcendence, as if to say, if we believe positively enough, we can transcend or avoid certain life experiences. But I'm pretty sure that type of transcendence would require us to break certain laws of the universe, specifically those governing quantum physics. Again, a whole other video, but basically, either everything is one or nothing is. Reality can't not be a part of the one, and we still say we believe in oneness. Science of mind teaches transformation, not transcendence. We are to transform our lives, transform the thing. Transcend certain thoughts, yes, but transform our experience. So I would say that while the science of mind does encourage individuals to focus on thoughts and beliefs that will create more of what they want, it does not mean that negative thoughts and emotions should be suppressed or ignored. Rather, the science of mind teaches us to understand that our thoughts and beliefs have a powerful impact on our reality, and that we can use this understanding to create positive change in our lives. It is important to acknowledge and process negative thoughts and emotions, as this can help us to understand and heal inner dissonance and transform less than desirable beliefs. As long as we believe that we still have negative thoughts and beliefs, then we still have dissonance. In essence, the science of mind is not about denying the existence of thoughts and emotions we may rather not have, but rather about transforming them into beneficial ones through a greater understanding of the laws of the mind and the power of conscious thought. While you're here, remember to hit like, subscribe, maybe even drop a comment. We would love to hear from you, and thanks for watching.
When I see traumatic things happening in the world, systems and frameworks of disenfranchisement, oppression, and discrimination, what can I do? What steps can I take to support change? Now, this question is one that I have heard a lot lately, and honestly, it's a question that I've begun to ask myself on a daily basis. The things that we see in our world can be so traumatic, heartbreaking, paralyzing, that often we are left feeling disoriented and hopeless. So how can I, just as a singular person, create any movement towards change? Well, I don't have an exhaustive list of answers to this question, but I do have a few key things that can serve as catalysts. And I'm going to be honest, we have to do something. We can no longer sit and watch and wait for someone else to do something. The time is now, for me, for you, for all of us. Important first step is to become aware and familiar with our own unconscious or implicit bias. And before you say, but I don't have any, I'm going to stop you right there. We all have them. Every single person living and breathing. And this is not something to feel guilty or ashamed about. It is something to be aware of. This is just how our brains work. We are constantly evaluating the world around us. Those who are like us, those who are not. Places that are safe, places that are not. People that are safe, and people that are not. And all of these are perceptions, often not based in truth. So the first thing that is ours to do is to pay attention to our reactions in certain situations, towards certain people, and continually asking questions regarding our judgments and reactions. I've always liked to ask myself, I wonder what that's about. And almost 100% of the time, it is about some judgment about a situation or a person. And then me acting from that judgment. We have to pay attention and ask the question. And then begin to shift our responses and behavior. We must also be in the habit of informing ourselves about what is happening in the world. No hiding our heads in the sand and then peeking up to see if it's all over. We must read and watch things that are written and produced from people that have different life experiences from our own. We must join in conversations around the presence of inequality and discrimination, supporting organizations and individuals doing the real work of social justice in the world. We cannot be afraid to get involved, whether it is walking in the streets or speaking out for truth and justice in our workplace or our social gatherings. Whatever is ours to do. Joining bystander, volunteer, and advocate training in our local communities. Electing leaders that are actively doing the work of addressing their own unconscious biases in ways that serve to create systems and frameworks of equality and justice. We are called to use our own platforms and our jobs, in our communities, our social circles, and even, yes, our ministries to work collectively towards a world where injustice is a thing of the past and equality and equanimity is the norm. Now is the time. Not yesterday, not tomorrow, but today.
Like, you would think, being a minister of a spiritual community, that I would have sort of understanding of the powers that move and operate kind of behind the scenes in life, right? And I think I have some grasp on that. I'm beginning to have some grasp on that. And yet it always amazes me to see how those things come together, right? And so we didn't discuss what our questions were going to be beforehand, and I ruminated on what my question might be, and threw out, I don't know, 5, 6 other questions.
Right.
I was started going. I was like, no, that's not the one. No, that's not the one. Right. And landed on this one that I was like, yeah, that's a good generic question to kind of just kick off the month.
Generic.
Do we really believe that you should only have positive thoughts?
Right.
It's like, yeah, all right. Well, that's, and I get into it, and yeah, definitely not generic, way more in depth, and oh, wow, I actually have a lot of thoughts about this. And I have my own bias and judgments and thoughts about the question, but I had no idea how directly related that question is to the question that you then brought, because it's almost the same question.
Yeah, it really is. And it's like Yeah, it's almost like a mindset question, isn't it? It's a
Yeah.
mindset.
The teaching doesn't say this, but somehow we have developed this interpretation of the teaching within a movement that says you are only supposed to have positive, feel good kind of experiences and
Yeah,
thoughts and life whatever, and if you're not, you
or
did
doing it wrong.
something wrong. And
Yeah.
so when we're faced with life that doesn't show up that way, we're like, what
What do we
what do
do?
we
Yeah,
do?
yeah,
And yeah, and so I think there, no, I don't think, I know there is a tendency, especially amongst ministers, not to address real life issues
yeah,
because we're not supposed to acknowledge those things as actually happening. And isn't it the same question? Isn't it like, how do we reconcile, if we believe in oneness, how do we reconcile bad stuff happening in the world? And so I think for decades it's been like, oh well, we don't, because that's their consciousness and that's the realm of effect,
yeah.
and we leave the realm of effect because blah 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 blah, whatever.
I think that there is a hesitancy sometimes, especially on the part of leaders, whether I mean, especially, and we're speaking of leaders in spiritual communities, I think there is a hesitancy because um, we don't. It's hard for us to make sense of it, and we don't know what to say, or we don't know how to react, and we don't want to react wrong, or we don't want to do the wrong thing, and so we do nothing. And so I think that we get paralyzed by this fear that it has to be exactly right or perfect. We have to have the perfect response and perfect reaction and the perfect whatever. And so we do nothing. And so then perfection is the enemy of the good. Perfection becomes this enemy of actually doing something. So then there's these gaps in the responses. There's these hesitancies to address things because, and like you say too, I think it is trying to avoidance of kind of the age-old avoiding of the discomfort. It's uncomfortable talking about things that we don't have all the answers to, or the things that we don't know the answers to, the things that scare us, the things that bring sadness, the things that bring all sorts of emotions that we'd rather not have. And so we don't know what to do with those, and we're
Yeah.
uncomfortable. And so instead of addressing the discomfort, instead of sitting in the discomfort, instead of having conversations in the discomfort, that the tendency is to not do those things because of avoiding the discomfort. And we know that we nothing gets changed with that, right?
Yeah.
Because growth and change and transformation, it comes through a period of discomfort, a period of doing something different than I have done before, and that's discomfort, right? And so when we can push through that, then we can begin to see change. But I think that's what our call
Yeah.
is to recognize, name it for what it is. This is uncomfortable. This sucks. Whatever language you want to put around it, and I'm going to do this, and I'm going to continue to come from my values and what I know to be true, and what I know to be this vision of a world where equanimity and equality and enfranchisement is the norm. We have to wade through the discomfort of all the emotions that get brought up in situations, especially the situations that we've seen
Yeah.
recently.
Yeah. And I recognize, I mean, even in the conversations that we've had about how do we want to respond,
Yeah.
and as we end up talking about how we want to respond so long that it's now past the time to respond, and it's like, oh, and it's that small voice that creeps in that's like, well, what can I even do? Being, I don't know, brave enough to just even step through that initial hesitance, that initial doubt, that initial whatever it is, and just do something, do
Something.
anything, right? Because if you,
Movement.
yeah,
Yeah.
literally just do, I'm telling myself, I guess, more than anyone else, just do something, because that something this time, that first step this time is two or three steps next time.
If these conversations and our own spiritual practices, our own focuses, the own things that we're doing in our own life, if it does not spur some sort of activity outwardly, I gotta say, what's the point then, right? For me, at least, it's like if what I'm doing in my life doesn't outpicture in a support of everything that I see, I mean, the planet, the individuals, systems, frameworks,
Yeah.
then I mean, our belief in wholeness is all of that. Like my inside reflects my outside, and the outside and the inside, and it becomes this kind of whole sort of system and framework. And so we can no longer, and we've seen it through history, especially like in spiritual communities, like, oh, okay, there's a lot of stuff going on. What should we do? Okay, we'll just hide over here in our own little spot. We can't do that anymore. We just can't, because we are seeing just the devastating effects of silence, the devastating effects of inaction. A global vision of a world that works for everyone. We got to get activating. And like I said, it doesn't mean, for some it could be these big, national platform work, and for some it's just in my own social group. If I hear someone saying something, or a framework or whatever, that is discriminatory, or something that is uh, doesn't align with justice and equality, then I speak out for that. I say something in that moment, or I use my own platforms, my own influences, and whatever. And those are also ways that we create change, because when we collectively do that, then it does have this kind of ripple effect. So we're not all called to march in the streets, but we're all called to do something, right? To take that inward outward.
It's been easy enough for me and people who look like me to be like, oh, well, all right, next time I'll do something next time, or I'll do something tomorrow, because it is. I mean, that's like the definition of privilege, is like, it doesn't directly impact me and my experience in this moment right now, because I'm convincing myself it doesn't, even though it definitely directly does. You can't have oneness if everything's not part of one, then nothing is. And so I can't believe what I say I believe and think I cannot do something, or that it doesn't affect me. Or
it's two opposing thoughts, isn't it? But how easily we convince ourselves we can do that.
We have an entire culture backed by decades of experience that we're just going to bypass, brush to the side, ignore all of the discomfort, all of the whatever, because we can.
Well,
and if that's not privilege, I don't know what is.
and it takes me back to your question too, a little bit, with this kind of toxic positivity sort of idea. And isn't that what has kind of kept us in the dark a little bit? When we have to focus on just think positive, or I think it
paralyzing.
It bypasses the very real lived experiences of most people in the world, every person in the world. And so that's what happens when we continually bypass those experiences and train our brains. Just think a positive thought, or just be positive, or don't speak against that, just be positive, or whatever we say. Then we bypass the actual really lived experiences of people in the world. And when we do that, then we convince ourselves that we don't have to stand for change. We don't have to speak up against things. There are some things that we do need to stand for, and to speak against. And the big thing is what, for something, against nothing. If ever a quote was mistaken or used for inaction, or justify inaction, that's one.
If it were true that what that person said and meant was, we should never ever oppose anything, we shouldn't stand to change anything, then we need to reassess why we're believing in what that person has said. Like, I feel like that just never gets addressed. Like, do you really mean that? Like, when you, random person, misquote this quote, do you really mean to use that as a means of, oh, well, I'm never going to walk in a march, I'm never going to protest, I'm never going to speak out against anything? Is that really what you mean? Like, you really mean that nothing is worth standing up for in that way? Maybe you should, just maybe you should reevaluate, like, why you have that belief. And I feel like we just don't address that. part.
I
We
like
just
how
we just jump right to like, I don't think that's what he meant.
I like, you know what, I think we're going to find that this month too, is that the questions bring more questions, which I think isn't that speaking to this power of curiosity, which is the theme for the month. It's
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
when we ask these questions and sit in these conversations that, can be uncomfortable, or they can be uh, whatever you label them. But when we begin to ask questions, and there's like, oh, and then this, and then this, and then what about this? And then that's what happens. It begins to create this layered conversation, this layered um, question asking. And then that's the power of curiosity, because it takes us a step further than where we were. So thanks for tuning in for this episode of Truth Be Told, where we're exploring the power of curiosity, and we're posing different questions each week. And isn't it amazing when we do that? The answers actually bring more questions, and then it becomes like this layered participation in life. And so we're excited about the questions that are going to show up for this month. And we know that curiosity is our superpower. So if you have never heard of Soul Evolution Collaborative and you would love to learn more, or you've been around for a bit and you want to see what's going on with Soul Evolution Collaborative and what events we have coming up, you can check out our website, soulevolutioncollaborative.org, and you will find everything that you would ever want to know about this community and about our offerings. And so if we don't see you at any of those this week, we'll see you back here for another episode of Truth Be Told.